Out on a limb this morning, and we're going to talk about where we are. Hopefully it will help us understand the Bible a little bit better. That's what my goal is, to be able to understand the overall half Portuguese, half English, meta narrative. A lot of people don't know where they are in the Bible. We know where we are, but where, when you're studying the Bible, do you know where you are in relation to beginning and Christ? That's one of the things I wanted to try to accomplish. This chart up here is something I ran into several years ago, and it was a big help to me. And so I thought I would share it. And if you've already seen something like this and know it, then just kind of listen like you're learning something and be happy with it. But it can be helpful. Now, this is not a total chart. I've got others. I've got several books of charts that help me understand and put things together. Now, what I would like to do is to read a little something from this Bible. Now, this Bible, I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but this is the Schofield Study Bible. Anybody familiar with this? Used it? Well, this is New King James. It's not the King James. Now, the reason I have this, and I have a King James, in case I ever went to a primitive Baptist church, and they wouldn't let me in the room almost without a King James Bible. And if they ever asked me to speak, I'd say, yeah, I'm using a Schofield Bible. And that opens a lot of doors. You may not know that. But this is one of the first study Bibles written back in the 1900s. Now I want to read one thing about chronology, because we're going to talk about chronology. And he said, in the study notes, no dates before 2100 BC are given because of the lack of evidence to fix such dates. Between 2100 and 1000, approximate dates are using. After 1000 BC, you can be almost exact and very assured of the dates of 1000 BC. Now, you'll notice when we get started here is that we're starting with Abraham. Now, I'll stand up in a minute and go over it, but the earliest date up here is 4004 BC. Now, that's the date of the creation of Adam and Eve. Now, I'm not worried about when the world was created. You read in the book of Genesis, and here's another thing I want to take a look at, and I've read this in many other places. So the word day is used in Scripture in 4 ways. That part of a solar day, 24 hours, a period between 24 hours, and a time apart from 24 hours, they call it like the Day of Atonement, which means a broad spectrum of time. So the day is used in 4 or 5 different ways, so it's very difficult. Now, when you start talking about this, people have a very strong opinion on this. If you're a young earth person that believes the world was created in 24 hours of 6 days each, and then you would put this creation time more or less around 4000 BC. As a matter of fact, some people get it even more specific. They believe the world was created at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, October the 22nd, in 4004. And then, now, that's getting a little specific. Now, I don't know how they can do that, but I'm not too worried about that. Now, in the book of Genesis, Chris will, he believes in what's called the gap theory, that there was a creation and the world was without form and void, and then the Spirit of the Lord began to move on it, and in 6 literal days the creation was made. So whatever happened before then, I'm not too worried about it. All I'm interested in is when Adam and Eve was created. The Big Bang Theory, a lot of good Christians will hold to the fact that the world was created, I believe, 13 billion years ago. That's when the world was created. Now, if I said that in some circles, they would ask me never to come back. But that doesn't bother me, because I go along with what his name left me, out there in California. He said there's been dozens of theories of creation, and they've all been proven wrong. But let me tell J. Vernon McGee. But let me tell you something. Nobody was there when it happened, so nobody knows for sure. So anybody could have been just about as accurate in terms of before. But how did they come up with this date? Well, what he did, very simple. He just backed up the dates all the way back from a lot of dates in the Bible, a lot of dates. He just started adding backwards and got back to 4004. Now, I will reasonably accept the fact that it's 4004 BC, because if you add the dates up of the age of each person, you will come to just about where we are today. I've got another little book at the house that they will say that in 2032 or 2028, just in a few more years, we're going to reach 6,000 years from the time of creation of Adam and Eve. At 4,000 BC, add and plus 2,000 from the time of Christ till now, you get 6,000 years. I'll go along with that pretty well. So that's my general understanding. But one of the things that I've been questioning myself, I'm going to answer a couple of questions before I really get started. Well, I am started, but Mary Esther asked me about the idea back in Numbers 5 when the priest tested the veracity of the woman saying that she never had been immoral. And she said, well, what about the man? Do they test the veracity, the truthfulness of him? Well, there are. I didn't go into them. But what I really wanted to emphasize at that point is the relation between health and guilt. That's what I wanted to emphasize. That's the reason I mentioned about the doctor on today's show when he said we could empty the hospital, half the hospital, we could empty it tomorrow if we could get rid of guilt. It's guilt that causes a lot of illness in people. If you get rid of guilt. The other thing, if you could get rid of stress. Stress and guilt go hand in hand, and stress and health go hand in hand. That's the reason I spent a couple of days on stress. If you don't control stress, it controls you. Now, as I meditate on this all week long from time to time, and when Jesus said, peace I leave with you. Don't let your heart be fearful. Now, that's not just a suggestion like have a nice day tomorrow. If you live with fear, you have all kinds of health problems. And it's very serious to live with fear. That's what I was trying to deal with, not to have fear. It's not an option. If it's a consequence of living with fear. And then in Hebrews it says Jesus came to deliver those who fear of death were all their lifetime held in bondage. Fear affects the Bible, affects your body very significantly, and if it's not under control, very seriously. I was reading again the other day about, and I mentioned this word cortisol. Cortisol can destroy your heart, your mind, emotions, Alzheimer's, dementia, everything you want to think about, it affects because it releases all kinds of hormones in your body. So it is very serious. The next thing I was thinking about is, should I talk about it? Well, I said, Lord, should I have done that? I didn't know how people responded to it, how you responded to it. But the more I looked in the Old Testament, the priests in the Old Testament were responsible also, not just for the spiritual nature of the people, but they were also responsible for their health of the people as well. The problem we have today is, the best I can tell, there's not too many preachers that deal with health of people, with the health that people have or don't have. And the number one reason, perhaps they don't figure that it's our responsibility to deal with health anymore. And I think of Asa as one of my favorite Old Testament kings. He got sick, he went to the Lord, and the Lord healed him. Later in his life, he got sick in his feet. Now I'm sitting there thinking, well, what could he have gotten sick in his feet with? Maybe he contracted diabetes, I don't know. But somehow or another, he was sick in his feet. And in all his sickness, he consulted the doctors, but not the Lord, and he died. Now that is a startling revelation. He went to the doctors, but he didn't go to the Lord and ask, what should I do about my health? And he died. One little short paragraph in there about how he died. So where do we go when we get sick? What do? The first thing we do is we run to the doctor, not the Lord. And I think the Lord can still do that. So that was my justification for dealing all of those 2 weeks off and on with health and stress, because it does have a biblical basis to it. You read in the Old Testament, and there's a lot that the priest had a responsibility for dealing with health. So now I'm going to move on to this. But I wanted, those 2 questions were lingering on, and I didn't think I answered either one of them very well, about, what about the man? And the next question was from Emily, were those dates literal, those years, or whether it could be something else? Now, I suppose everybody deals with that sooner or later in their life. How could these people live that long? Well, I think there was a couple of reasons for that. One is God had to establish a pattern, a habit. We still do some of the things today that started back in the time of Adam and Eve. And unfortunately, I couldn't find my verse as I was reading through the Bible this year. I ran across it and I didn't mark it, so it wasn't, one of those major things. But God was talking to him. He said, I want you to plant and harvest just like I told you to. The way you harvest wheat is not the way you harvest barley. And I told you the difference between the 2 of them. Now, when did he tell that difference to Adam and Eve? When did he tell them? Well, Adam and Eve lived from roughly 4004, and he lived over here. You can come take a look at this in just a minute. He runs over here, and that puts him dying somewhere around 1042. So he lived a long time. Now, what did the Lord talk to him about in all that time? He showed him a lot of things, and he had fellowship with him a long time. Now, another question. Now, I'm getting out here in my imagination's running a little bit wild, I'll admit, and so you can scratch all this off. But when my wife and I were talking about this, before he sinned, he said, do you think Eve had children before the fall? And I said, I don't know. I said, there's a lot of people that wonder about that, and there's a lot of people that say yes, and a lot of people say no. So I'm just sitting here thinking, it says that God walked in the garden with Adam and that talked to him. What you doing, Adam? How the little kitties doing? So all that talking going on. He's just had a good fellowship with them. So that could be happening. And Sharon said, I blame this on her. I'm really doing good with Adam. Said if she didn't have any pain with children, she could have a lot of children, just all day long for every other year for a couple of 100 years, thinking how many children you had there. And so that may have answered where Cain got his wife. I think I told you this before. I was witnessing to these couple of guys, and this fella said, well, if you could tell me where Cain got his wife, maybe I'd accept Christ. And I said, I have no idea, but if I was able, I'd probably tell you. Now, I didn't realize what I'd said till he started laughing. But anyway, I'll leave this chart up here. You can take a look at it. And if you want to, I was thinking about hanging it from one of these things here. Somebody wants to look at it even more closely, because this goes all the way around to our day. But you take a look at Adam and Eve, 930 years. That puts them right over here. Now, a couple of people that I really want to focus in on is Seth. Seth. Now, he's the son of of Noah. Now, this chart doesn't have Ham and Japheth on it. Another chart that I've got does have Ham and Japheth on it, but this just has Seth on it. So you take a look at here, go back to Noah, and you've got Noah overlapping with Methuselah, and Methuselah overlapping with Adam a few hundred years. So you got a direct communication from Adam to Methuselah, and then you've got from Methuselah to Noah a few hundred years, and then you've got Shem. So these people communicated with each other, overlapping for as much as 200 years. So they could communicate. Now, I ran into a simple illustration the other day. It doesn't 100% one-to-one with this, but what this fella did, he had a little jar, looked like about 5-6 inches deep, and he dumped about 100 fleas in there, and he put a lid on it. And the fleas were jumping around in there. Now, they never jumped any higher than the lid. When he took the lid off, they didn't jump any higher than the lid, even though the lid was gone, because there was a transfer of learning from one generation to the other. So that's how generational learning happens. So these fleas learned not to jump any higher, and they taught the new fleas that were born, the new second generation, the same thing. And so they never had to put the lid back on, because none of them jumped any higher than the lid, even though they could jump as high as they want to. Now, there's a lot of other illustrations that goes along like that as well with animals, how they inadvertently taught one generation from the other. You've probably heard the story of the fellow lady that was cooking a roast, and the son-in-law came in and said, "How do you cook the roast?" I said, "Well, the first thing you do, you take it and you cut this couple of inches off of it, and then you put it in the pan and cook it." "Well, why do you cut the 2 inches off of it?" "I don't know, my mother did it." "Why did your mother do it?" "Well, my grandmother did it." "Well, why did she do it?" "Well, her grandmother did it." So they kept chasing back and back and back. And they said, "Why did your great-grandmother cut the 2 inches off the roast?" "Well, it wouldn't fit in the pan without it." You probably heard that story too somewhere down the line. And so you just repeat things that you learn from somebody, but you have no idea why you do them. And so then when somebody comes along and does some changing, you say, "Well, what are you doing that for?" "I don't know. That's just the way it's always been done." And so that's one of the difficulties in change, I guess you could call it. So, at any rate, let me see where I am. So where do we fit? So we keep on going all the way around here to Shem. And now he lived at the same time as Abraham. Now he and Abraham overlapped a couple of hundred years. Now that was one of the most significant things that caught my eye. What do you think Shem told Abraham? How did they communicate? Well, he had almost just a couple of generations away from Adam. So Adam could talk. And what would it be like if you were back here with Noah and you were just overlapping a little bit with Adam, and then you were overlapping for sure with Methuselah, because he overlapped with Adam a long time. And now, I'll leave this up here afterwards. I'll leave, you can roll it up if you want to. But I don't have any, it's not hanging up in my house because I don't have a place for it. So, but obviously it needs to be bigger because it goes around here to Christ and then just keeps on going. But I'm not interested in that part of it. And it's got all the other little dates over here about Saul. But at any rate, go back here to Shem. Now, he died. He lived with Abraham. He and Abraham were living together. Or lived at the same time, I guess I better say it that way. And then he died, make sure I got that straight, in about 2150. And another thing that happened to him at the same time, or similar time, is that, if I can read it sideways, is Sarah died at the same time that Shem died. Now that was an eye-opener for me when I saw that. Now how do you think that affected Abraham? He lost two, his wife, and he lost one of his best friends, no doubt, I think anyway. And Shem died at the same time. They died both at the same time. Now, I know that's not going to change what you eat for breakfast in the morning, and maybe not change how you live in the morning. But for me, it just helps me understand how things fit together and how God had things moving and running and how all things just kind of work. It just helps you know about a compass. If I were to ask you how many points are there on a compass, a person would say, well, there are 4 points on a compass. But that doesn't help you anything. That doesn't help you at all, knowing there's 4 points, north, south, east, and west. What is the 5th thing on the compass you got to know?
What direction you're going.
Direction you're going. One other thing too, that's important. You got to know where you are. The center, that's as important as knowing the 4 points of the compass. So if you don't know where you are, it doesn't matter where you're going, you're not going to get there. It's very, very important to know the 5 points of the compass, where you, north, south, east, and west, and where you are. So once again, it won't make a tremendous amount of difference in your daily lives to know a lot of this, but it does help understand me. It helped me understand how all this kind of fits together. Now, if you were to keep on going all the way around the circle, you would understand more where this right here is Christ's death, and that happened somewhere. Some people will put it at 29 BC. Now, the one good thing about the way God keeps a calendar is we know exactly when that date was. I mean, it's not anything to question. If you can just determine where Easter is, Passover is, by looking at the moon. Now, let me jump back and deal with just one other little quick thing here, calendar-wise. You know as well as I do, there are 3 or 4 different calendars that we have. We have our calendar, and every 4 years we have what? Leap year. Because we're off a quarter of a day. So you've got to add a little bit a day. Now, the Jewish calendar is a 360-day calendar. Now, you've been with me long enough, I've been with you long enough to know that I do get hung up on time from time to time. But it's interesting to me. Time is interesting. God created time in the first chapter of Genesis when he created the sun and the moon for time. Now, I had a couple of Jewish friends in Brazil, and they said that the Jewish calendar is the most accurate. It is extremely accurate. They have a 360-day calendar. So every so many years, they have to add, I think it's something like a couple of 100 days to put it back on target, put it back in sync. Now, you do have another calendar. You have the solar calendar. And then you have the agricultural calendar. So what would happen if the calendars weren't adjusted from time to time and we had winter in the middle of our July? That wouldn't work. And so you've got to organize the sun and the moon and going around the earth and the earth turning and all that kind of stuff. You got to adjust it to make sure that the agricultural calendar is accurate. When the sun actually is not passing, it's the earth moving over the equinox, and that sets the time for the summer, winter, autumn, all that kind of time. So God knew exactly what he was putting together when he organized time. So time is extremely important in the Bible. There's a lot of studying on that time. So at any rate, These are the 2 or 3 major things that I was more interested in this chart, is how long Adam and Eve lived. And when Noah came into existence, he and Adam were contemporaries for a couple hundred years. And then Shem was contemporary with Noah, of course, his dad. And then Abraham was contemporary with Shem, going down here to Abraham over here, and Sarah and Shem dying at the same year. Now these could be like what I read just a minute ago. It could be off a few years. But when you're looking at almost 6,000 years past, what's 10 years? You know, it's not that critical. A couple of years here and there. Well, time's up, but does anybody have any questions? Did this make any difference to you other than just interesting information?
Were they all in the same area? That's the thing I think about.
Mm-hmm.
Israel's got to be pretty good size, but were they all in Israel? Were they all over Egypt? Or how would they run across each other? Not unless they're in this pretty good general area.
Well, Abraham was way down south when he was called out of the Ur of the Chaldees. But from my point of view, they're not that far different. They're not that far away. You remember from high school, or first time I ran into it, the Fertile Crescent. That little section in there, that crescent up around Mesopotamia and the Tigris and Iran and all that area there, that little area there, up and down the coast of Mediterranean, and that's all Fertile Crescent. They all lived there, not too far from the water, and everybody lives close to the water, and that was where that's where you could get food. Mm-hmm. So they kind of all living in that general area for a while. I'm not really totally up on that, but relatives were very important. You remember when they wanted to get a child for Joseph, he said, go back over to our brother-in-law over there, Laban. Go find a wife. I don't want a wife here. I want him to go back over there to Laban. I don't want Esau. Esau got married this lady, and Rebecca said, she's a pain for me. I guess that was the first phrase. She said, she vexes my soul. I guess there's other words, but anyway.
And geographically, where was the Garden of Eden?
Well, that's a difficult question as well. Now, I have read some things recently come out. They think it was all the way over in the east, which you move over towards the Indian Ocean in that area there. It was over in the east. Now, some people will put it around the Tigris River in that area, all around that part of things. So, that's one place. Personally, I'm not interested in finding, because the first person I'd run into is that flaming angel with that flaming sword. So I'd really rather not know where that is or go see it.
Isn't the Euphrates mentioned in Genesis?
Yes.
Which is in Iraq. So
Iraq, okay.
That's what I've always thought, is it's in Iraq because of the Euphrates River
Yeah.
being there. But who knows, they could have renamed something.
Well, the other thing is they can't find the 4 rivers. One river is not there. A couple of the rivers are not there anymore because of water. And how much did the flood change everything? That all changed everything drastically, moved things around. But one of my favorite guys that is an archaeologist, he said, the flood, wiped out everybody, but there wasn't that many people to wipe out. They all lived in that same area, so it didn't have to. This goes back to that debate, is it a worldwide flood or just a local flood? Well, you could wipe everybody out just with a local flood. But it could have been a worldwide flood. I'm not going to deny that. But there just wasn't that many people. And then the other thing, minor thing, is peg leg here, not peg leg, what was his name?
Sounds like a pirate.
No, let's see.
There's a pig leg barbecue place, I think, in
Yeah.
Nashville.
Peg leg pork or
Yeah, pig leg porker.
Oh, pet leg. Easy to remember them, peg leg. It said he was alive in the time when the world divided. Now, I looked at that at one time and I said, well, that's when some people think that it's the East and West hemispheres. Could be. Another translates, people think, it was a time that nations scattered out with a different language. Could be either one of them. Somehow, most everybody believes that North and South, East and West Americas were joined. Africa, you can see it on just any map. You can tell that at one time they were connected and they moved apart. So I think all that happened in that dark time when the world was dark. I know you got me staying here. So at any rate, y'all can keep looking at this if you want to, but I just thought it helped me to see some of this, and I thought it might help you to see some of this too, of how the people were so interrelated, not interrelated, but interconnected, and had acquaintances back at that time.
Yeah, you discover that they intermarried so many times.
Yeah. Now there's another book that has the division of the people, the 70 groups of people from the Noah, where they went. That's pretty much proven over the years where the 70 different groups of people went and where they lived. All that's kind of interesting. Now, like I said, it probably won't change a whole lot what you eat for breakfast in the morning, but it's just something kind of interesting to know. Well, you can look at this as long as you want to, and
Thank you, Ray.
I'll leave it here.
It was interesting. I like what you said about Eve having possibly 100 kids that really wasn't accounted for over a span of a long time. Did she stay like 30 years old for 200 years? Or was she an older woman and lived? You know, it's weird to think about that. We probably look old from maybe 65 and on, but you know, if they aged like we did, good grief, you'd have another 560 or 600 years on the backside of that.
Well, they didn't have all the diseases and stuff
That's
we
true.
have. They didn't eat bad like we do.
yeah, that's
Of course. They didn't have doctors, they got bit by a cobra or something, so,
Well, they never died.
well, that's true.
I asked a teacher that I had, a philosophy teacher in seminary, I said, do you mean to tell me you don't think they had any pain at all? I said, if Adam were walking around and stubbed his toe on a rock, no, he didn't feel anything. He didn't have not any pain at all. Nothing. He didn't know what pain was.
There you
So
go.
can we assume the aging process was just not like it is this day and time?
Oh yeah, that says so. God said that people aren't going to live any longer. They're going to be 70, 70 years,
Right.
and if by reason of strength, be 80. So it shortened the age down, because you can imagine what it would be like if somebody like Hitler lived 500 years.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be anybody left.
Had to do that to shorten the death rate, I think. But that's all speculation, you know. I mean, there's a famous study that when they talk about things like this, there was a big study, what was it, 300 or 400 BC, AD. How many angels could stand on the head of a needle? You know, probably never heard that.
Yeah.
You've mentioned it before.
But there's a big study about that. So anytime in seminary, we would start talking about things like this. That's just speculation. And the teacher would say, well, you're just arguing about how many angels can stand on the head of a needle. Because that was a big theological debate years ago. So how old people look, how many kids they have, is all, you know, what color are the eyes of the people on Mars, you know. But this other stuff, you know, we can feel reasonably sure that these people overlapped. How well they knew each other, that would be a thing, but I just know that Adam probably, most likely, told Methuselah a whole lot. I mean, I would ask a lot of questions. And then Methuselah talked to Noah a whole lot. He died the year of the flood. And so, anyway, I think it's just interesting to know, put it in a chart, yellow ink, about how these people overlapped. And you can keep on looking at this and go all the way around. Well, there's other questions.
Oh, one last one. What do you have as the last thing going around to the left? Where are we at?
Well, we're at, if you keep looking at this and keep going around 100, 200, 300, 400 AD,
Uh-huh.
we stop at 2000 AD.
Okay.
I thought I saw 2017 on there earlier.
You don't unload it, but this is the only part that I was primarily interested in.
Yeah.
So how much longer are we gonna be here?
And then the other reason is, that was the only thing, Ezo big enough to put the chart on.
Well, you could probably just leave it on that tripod. If you have to, put the couch in front of it, and people can move it out and look at it.
Well, that's what I was
That
thinking
way-
about, taking, the hooks that you get at Walmart
Yeah.
and then just tie some strings and you can hang it and look at it if you want to. And then sit behind the couch. Just kind of look over your head.
Well, it's working like that right now.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's all right. You just
Perfectly
can't,
okay as far as I'm
you
concerned.
couldn't see,
I was gonna say, you don't want it bent though like that.
if anybody wants to look at it further. And if I break down and buy the other book, I'll bring it and chase down Ashkenazi. One of the guys that I work with down at, or talk with down at rehab, he's an Ashkenazi Jewish guy. His mother was a computer programmer. That's the reason I started putting two together. I said, your mother's pretty smart, is she? An Ashkenazi guy.
They have the highest IQ of any cultural group on the planet.
Mhm.
Ashkenazi Jews, their average IQ is about 106. It's about 6 points higher than the average of the United States.
Yeah, you got Jerry Lewis.
Well, there's a lot of them. Jeff Bezos, he's Ashkenazi. And,
Zuckerberg.
You go down the list, and most of the Jewish leaders in the United States are Ashkenazi. They're Europeans. That's what that means.
Okay, well, let's pray. Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for our time. Thank you for giving us insight into knowing how you move and how you work. Bless the people on our list today. And we thank you for your goodness. We pray in Christ's name. Amen.